I'm sure many of us know someone, if not you, who's felt uncomfortable talking about religion and money or just have feelings of shame or guilt about it. Welcome to Yahweh's Money, a podcast where we discuss the crossroads or intersections of religion and money. We're going to go deep into topics like tithing and saving and debt and so much more from the religious view. I'm your host, Shay Cook, CEO and founder, Crusaders for Change, LLC, and our co-host is Vanessa McNelly, one of our financial counselor, coach, educators. Let's talk about God and money. Welcome to another episode of Yahweh's Money, the crossroads of religion and money. Today, we're going to be talking about managing money in our marriages or in a marriage. Super excited about this conversation. We have our co-host here, Vanessa, as well as our guest, Tanisha Allen, who is a friend, a military spouse, homemaker, and accredited financial counselor candidate, and has a personal small business and as a professional organizer and a book reviewer. So welcome to the show, Tanisha.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. So like I said, we're going to get into conversation about marriage and money. This is a taboo topic. A lot of people do not want to talk about marriage and money. When we're helping couples, usually the main issue is communication. It's not even about money. But we're going to get into some of the questions around money and marriages. So including who should be managing it? Should it be your money, my money, or our money, or is it God's money? Why do we or our finances bring such discord in a marriage? And if a breadwinner, does that mean, if I am the breadwinner, does that mean that I get to make the majority of the financial decisions? And wherever the spirit moves us, we're going to talk about it with marriage and money. So the first question is, how should money in a marriage be managed? Should it be your money, my money, our money, God's money? Well, in Genesis 2:24, it says that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So how do our values, religious beliefs, and or childhood shape the way we deal with finances in our household? Tanisha?
So, all of that impacts our finances. It's specifically how we were raised and how our parents handled money. Whether they talked to us about money or they didn't talk to us about money, we usually internalize a lot of those behaviors and beliefs, and we bring that into marriage with us. And since marriage is two people coming together, now you have almost four different opinions about marriage between two people. And it just, you know, it, it's difficult because you're already married, you're already trying to learn each other, love each other, and all of that. And then you bring something in there that, like you said, is taboo, marriage or money, rather. We don't talk about money. It's something that is a secret and it's swept under the rug. And, we don't talk about what we have or anything like that. And we kind of take that with us in the marriage and we kind of try to not have those conversations. Um, but my personal belief is that it's all God's money to begin with, and He just allows us to manage it. And because
Mm-hmm.
of that, then we have to manage it with our spouse. So for us, our religious belief comes in that we follow the Bible when it comes to how money is spent and how we are to handle money. And, we just thank God for every penny basically. And we, especially large purchases, we seek His decisions. But yeah, that my money mindset or your money mindset, I have not seen that work efficiently yet. There's usually
Mm-hmm.
always some type of like undercurrent, whether it's a communication issue, it's a selfish issue or whatever, it comes out in different ways. Whereas most people that I know that do the our money follow or God's money followed by our money, it normally works quite well, and finances are normally not their main issue.
So I have to say I love that. I've never heard that God's money first with a relationship. So I love that thinking about it that way because I think that puts everybody in the right headspace and mindset to talk about it because it's not yours or mine. It's his and then ours. I was raised in a household where my mother made more money than my father, which was kind of unusual. But she always had the philosophy of each of them had their own money and then they had a pot together. And that, worked for them. But I think with most, couples and relationships, every couple is different. So it's so hard to find one thing that fits all these situations because of personalities. And usually there's a spender and a saver in a relationship. So I think there's so many ways to look at this, and just finding the right combination is something we all have to do. But I think one thing we can all do is make sure that it's God's money first. I love that.
Exactly. I love that too. And growing up, it was definitely a more traditional household where the father made more money, the mom was there to support the kids, take care of house and home. But also, it was taboo, and I don't think that was a hiccup, Tanisha. Marriage is taboo these days for a lot of people, so that's another episode. but but when it comes to managing money and marriage and money, I was always told that you're supposed to be a joint account, or it was the man was in charge of things. So as my husband and I got married, we decided to do separate accounts. And that was like, oh my God, who are you to have separate accounts? That it was such a stigma, such a taboo topic. Like, I wouldn't share it with anybody for like probably the first 15 years of marriage. Like, not like I needed to share it anyway. It's none of your business. But I mean, but people were like, oh, you have separate accounts? Oh, what is that about? I'm like, well, that's what works for us. I mean, we had a joint account for like the mortgage and childcare and stuff, but I mean, it just works for us till to this day. I always tell people we don't have hardly any, arguments around money because we had it, figured out from the very beginning. What works best for us is for us. It's not about the world and everybody else's idea of your money, my money, our money. It's about what works best for us. But I agree, it should be God's money first. Now that's a conversation that my husband and I don't necessarily, I wouldn't say we don't agree on. We both serve the same God, but sometimes it's that's has some issues with that situation. But I agree with that. It's God's money, and then whatever works for you and is balanced in your household is how it should work. So
Yeah, and I will say
yeah.
that having the joint account is, I think, what is important. Because what I see that doesn't work is when marriages are treated like a roommate situation. So it's like,
Mm.
oh, the mortgage is this much. Here, I'll give you half, and you'll take your half and then pay the mortgage. When you have a joint pot that takes care of the household, that works out much better. So, and I think that the way that my husband and I handle it is, of course, all of our money goes into our joint account. And then because we are very specific about the goals that we set, we know, okay, personally, we wanted to have, I hate to use the word allowance because it's such a negative term when you say it with adults. But because we've decided on it and we've agreed upon it, we've given ourselves personally an allowance that this is how much money that we would like to spend this month in order to allow all of the other money to accomplish our goals, whether that's saving, paying off debt, retirement, or anything like that. Um, but that's also because we are very connected when it comes to that bigger pot of money. We know exactly what it is that we want that pot to go to. And, we decided we can make sacrifices when it comes to what we personally spend. And then, of course, if there's a month that doesn't work that way, that's where we have the conversation and say, okay, hey, I need a little bit more money. Is that okay? Are you good with that? Or if I see that he's spending more money or he's getting close to his limit, then it's like, okay, babe, do you need more money this month? Like, is this something that we need to reevaluate? Do we need to change the budget amount for this category? And it's all about the conversation. I know. So I grew up in, I guess, technically a single parent household. My parents were separated for most of my life, and my dad was really great with money, and my mom was not. And so my dad was the one that taught me about money, and then of course my mom's lessons were what really not to do. um, and I just knew that they never taught me anything about who should be managing the money or anything like that. It was just this is how you handle money, and it was always directed towards me. It was never a conversation of if you get married, and that's probably because they weren't married, they weren't together, so they didn't feel to pass that on. Um, and whereas Chris's parents, they both were married, but his dad handled everything. And but they didn't pass that on to him. He didn't care. Like, you know, when we first got married, he was just like, okay, you handle finances better because you're in the finance industry, you do it. And that we kind of took it that way until I realized, no, like we need to really handle everything together.
So I love that thought though about having a joint account. I think so many people, they think, oh, well, I'm going to have my money. The other person's going to have their money. But, same as you, I've seen so many times where, I'm working with a couple and one will say, oh, well, I gave the other person money to pay the bills or I gave. And, when you look at it that way, it's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. You didn't give. You live in this household too. The groceries pay for, the food that you eat. So I think having that joint account, so you're both putting in towards your household together, means that, you are more connected, like you were saying. So, I've seen, like I said, so many times people are like, oh, well, I gave this person money or I'm giving the money for the kids. But it's like, no, 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 no. You have to have that household, goal together, since it is your household together.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So, but what about before marriage? What are some of the values about money that couples should discuss prior to getting married? I think that all aligns with what we're saying. Before we even get into the conversation about joint accounts, separate accounts, how are we going to pay
Mm-hmm.
for the household? Shouldn't we be having some conversations about merging those bank accounts, debt, savings, financial goals? Me thinking back right now, I don't think my husband and I really had any conversations about money. It just went into it, and then I brought all the stuff from my parents' marriage into my
Mm-hmm.
marriage, and that took a few years for us to sort out. And he would point it out. He's like, that worked for your mom and dad, that doesn't work for us. So we had to really have conversations about what works for us, when it comes around money. But what kind of conversations, or should you have conversations around this money before you get married?
Yes.
Tanisha? Yeah.
um, Definitely, because it is a major aspect of not only marriage, but just our lives in general. Money is so important, especially over here in America, where we are just um, full of consumerism, right? Like we are all about what we
Mhm.
can spend and what we can buy and what we can show off and all of that. And, having two spenders in a marriage may not be the most healthiest thing. So it's like, we need to talk about this. And if we, the best time to talk about it is before marriage. Honestly, I feel like also before an engagement, because this is the type of information you want to know. Like, do I want to marry this person or not? Um,
Mhm.
but it is, talking about almost everything. How are you going to combine the bank accounts if you're going to do that? Who's going to handle the money the majority of the time? Talking about our history. Is there anything in your history, money related, that I need to know about? What does your credit look like? How much debt are you in? Um, you know, maybe even coming up with some type of scenarios, like if we ever get into this situation, how would you handle this, or how would you advise that we handle this, in order to make sure that you're either on the right page together, and if you're not, then okay, is this something that we can come together and create our response to, or create how we want to handle it? And I mean, honestly, it's one of those things where if you can't agree, that's the time where it's like, okay, is this the right person for me? Is there other things that might be an issue? Because finances are such a major part of our lives, and we need to be comfortable with it, and we need to be comfortable talking to our spouse or our future spouse about it. If we're not comfortable talking to them about it, I mean, that's a bigger issue. So
Yeah, I feel like too, money is still taboo and none of us were really taught to talk about these things. So, having that conversation with ourselves, let alone with another person, is not something that we were really, prepared for. I am divorced. And, my first husband and I, we got married super quick. Was a military spouse during, the surge in '06. Got married on the third date, and then he deployed for a year and a half. So I was left to manage
Mhm.
this new household, by myself, and he was away. So we never had those conversations and talks. And that's something that I think, if we would have done that in the beginning, and not rush things so much, that we could have, we could have made things work a little bit easier, because we were newly married, new careers, that type of thing, and then throwing money on top of it, that's a lot to handle. And I think you're right. If we can have those conversations, talk about it beforehand, then we are better prepared, for later on, and we're on the same page. And I know that in my dating life lately, that's something that I look at. I talk to, somebody in the first few dates about, their goals. And, I look at what they have or they don't have, not because I'm greedy, but because I want someone with similar values as me, and someone that I
Mm-hmm.
know that if we are together for the long haul, that they can take care of me if something happens and I can take care of them. So I think these are super important conversations, and unfortunately, we don't think about it until later on in life.
Yeah, because we're all lusting or in love and we're blinded. I always tell
Mm-hmm.
my husband, I got married very young. Been married, I think, 23 years now almost. And got married at 20 and he was 21, 22. And yeah, I was worried about was I was super attracted to him, lusting love in him. And that's all I was worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Like getting out of my parents' house. Like, let me be
Right.
real. That's what I was
Right.
worried about. I was not thinking about money, wasn't thinking about children, which I got pregnant 6 months later. Like I wasn't thinking about any of that. And so now I'm like, I told my daughter who's 21, is like, you need to have these conversations. Or if you're
Mm-hmm.
not, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
have them with your significant other. Like, what do you think about children? What do you think about money? Because and I always tell people, don't get married in your 20s because you're still learning yourself. I did
Exactly.
not know who
Mm-hmm.
I was, and now I'm marrying somebody else who doesn't know who we were a boy and girl getting married. We had no clue. Our first duty station was Germany. We went over there, and I mean, yeah, it was just a craze. We made
Mm-hmm.
some major mistakes with money, with relationships, lack of communication. The list goes on. Thank God we had some base values because we would not be together if we did not. So we believed in God. We believed in love, relationships, family, trust. Those kind of things were values that we had, so we can align on that financially. If we didn't have that, we would not be together today. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They're so into the attraction, the lust, and the
Right.
love. And then when you get married, now you're joining two people together. As God says, you mother and
Mm-hmm.
father, you leave your mother and father, and now you're united as wife and husband, and we become one flesh, which is a whole nother conversation as well, because I believe you're still two fleshes coming together. But that's my own interpretation. But when it comes to the money, that's definitely, it's hard to have those conversations. I mean, I believe everybody needs to go through some kind of financial counseling before they get married, to be honest.
Totally.
Agreed. All types of counseling. Just go down the list.
Mental, everything. Yeah.
And we still live in this world too where we see so many fairy tales, and love will conquer all and everything will work out in the end. And we see all this, and we don't see that you have a spouse who hides credit card purchases from you. I have a cousin, and for years his wife would make purchases, and before he would get home, she would stash them away, from her private account. I had my ex-husband stole $22,000 from our bank account, before our divorce. So, you don't know how to handle these situations because, you're so in love, and you think, you're going to have that fairy tale.
And then reality hits, and you're like,
Exactly.
oh, shoot. This is real out in these streets. Marrying somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
bringing all the
Mm-hmm.
baggage, they have to your
Yep.
relationship. Wait a minute. I have baggage too. I'm bringing all the baggage I have to this situation. And we're trying to sort through all that baggage and
Mm-hmm.
talk about money and talk about in laws and talk about where we're going to live and
Right.
talk about children and talk about estate planning and life. It's
Mm-hmm.
so much
Mm-hmm.
professional careers and all the other stuff that comes with that situation. I mean, who wants to talk about money? You're just tired thinking about it. you know? Man. And so why do finances bring such discord to a marriage? We kind of discussed that already, but
Mm-hmm.
Jesus said in Matthew 12:25, a household divided against itself will not stand. And according to divorce.net, financial incompatibility is one of the top reasons, as we've heard many times over the couples divorce, citing that 40%, and I believe this is higher, of couples divorced due to the way their ex-spouse handled money. I've heard it's been
Mm-hmm.
upwards of 50 and 60%. And then Philippians 2:3-4 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. So, based off of this, how could we, or why is there such discord in a marriage?
Because there's discord in the world about money. um, there just is. You know, we have this way that we think that the more money we have, the happier we will be, and we know that, you know, up to a certain dollar amount that may be true, but anything over that dollar amount, we're no more happier than we were before. And because the world is, I won't speak for the world because not everybody in the world is like this, but because the US is very money hungry, and we are very vain and all about vanity, that gets ingrained in us, especially in this day and age of social media where we're seeing everybody's highlight reel and we're able to see like everybody's best. And, you know, it's like, well, I want to show you what I have. And I just bought this new car and I just took this trip and I did this and did that. And, you know, in your head, if you're not able to do all of that, it's like, how can I do all of that? Okay, I need to take out credit cards. I need to do this. I need to do that. I need to move some money around. And we take that into our marriages. We, you know, as we want to keep up with the Joneses. I will speak from personal experience when we decided to build our house. I decided to build a house. We were married, and I knew that I always wanted to be a homeowner. And Chris was just like, okay, we can own a home. That's no problem. So then I said, okay, I want to build a home. I don't want to buy a home that somebody's already lived in. He's like, okay, if you want to build a home, then let's go. And we had a budget that we had set, but because I wanted my house to look a certain way, which where I didn't have like a person in mind that I was copying, but I definitely had like an aesthetic in mind. I wanted it to look a certain way and feel a certain way because of something that I've seen in the past. And that's how I built my house. And here it is 6 or 7 years later. And I'm just like, you know what? Did we need all of these rooms for just the two of us? Do I like cleaning all of this house every single week? Like, there's so many things that I'm just like, you know, if I could go back and do it over again with what I know, I wouldn't get such a big house for the two of us. Like, it's just the two of us. And I think of how much money we could have saved, you know, what we could have done, the trips that we could have taken, all of that, the experiences that we could have had, instead of focusing on, okay, we need to make sure we pay the mortgage and the light bill, all of that. But I really believe that, I think that's why also, you know, in the Bible, it tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil. And I believe that it just goes right into our marriages. If we have this fascination with how much money we're making, and we want to be the highest earner, and we want to do all of these things, then where does love, or where does communication, or just making sure that we're comfortable with each other, like where do all of those rank if all we're focused on is how much money do you make, how much money do I make? Well, you need to be making more money because you're not bringing in enough. Those are, you know, just things that we need to focus on. And though that's by having those conversations early on. And then if you're already married and you're already struggling with your finances, then it's time to sit down today and say, okay, what do we want from our finances? What do we want them to look like? What are our goals? And how do we accomplish this together?
So, Financial Investopedia defines financial infidelity as when couples lie to each other about money. One could be taking on debt or spending more than they say they are. So, how could we prevent this from happening or work through it if it already has?
This is where we need to have open communication, and we need to have access to each other's things. You know, I'm not a fan of, you know, oh, you can't see my phone, and you know, I can't see your phone. I can't have your logins to your bank accounts. You can't have logins to my bank account. Um, since we're married, I'm a firm believer in what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours, and we need to approach it together. So, you know, while we don't often look at each other's bank accounts without the other person knowing. We know that we have the option to. And I think that knowing that you have the option to is something that will prevent you from doing anything crazy. Um, but then also, I don't have a reason to check my husband's bank accounts because he's very open with, okay, this is what I spent that was outside of the budget this week. I'm the same way. I'm like, hey, we needed this. So I went ahead and bought it. And so we know that there's no sneaking around that's going on, and that's really what it is. You're sneaking, and when you start to have that thought of, I need to hide this, or I want to hide this, then that's when, okay, you need to have an open conversation with not only your spouse, but I also think like whether a therapist or a spiritual leader or something, because those negative thoughts can just go. I think of Jesus saying, when it comes to was it adultery, it's like not only is the act of adultery considered adultery, but the thought of
Thought.
adultery. And so it's like we need to really just change our mindset and really rethink. And going back to what Vanessa was saying earlier about the mindset of I, me, and not we and us, because we tend to think of only ourselves, and even quoting the scripture that you gave earlier from Philippians, you know, don't look at it as my money. Like, it's not, or it's my credit card, it's my this. You're a family, y'all have goals, there's things that you want to achieve, and the way to achieve it is by coming together and doing that. And if you can think of everything as, like we started, God's money first and then our money, then you realize that a lot of the negative things that happen with money don't necessarily happen as often. You don't really have to have too many of the conversations. So, like, I know obviously what we're talking about now is like, okay, conversation after conversation after conversation. But in reality, in the course of a marriage, if there's open communication, if there is trust, and there is no secrets, you're not hiding anything, these conversations happen normally, and it's not something that you have to say, okay, every day at 12 o'clock we need to check in with each other about money. you know it's not. It's like, hey, I drove by Crumble Cookies and I stopped and got me a donut today. Sorry, like, but it's just being open and honest about it like that. And um you know it definitely is a connection to, like, I like the term financial infidelity, because I know there's like a conversation now about like what's really considered cheating and all of that, and finances and hiding and all of that can have such an impact on your life and your marriage and your credit and all of that, that it definitely needs to be a part of that conversation. So we need to have the open communication, the trust, no secrets, sharing of passwords and all of that, and just making sure that we're comfortable. If you're not comfortable with any of that, then there's something deeper we need to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah. This is something when I work with clients and work with couples, I often tell them to have a number in mind. And, if they want to spend over a specific amount, that needs to be discussed in the household. So whether it's $20 or $5,000, whatever it is that you guys decide on as a couple, there needs to be that number so that neither of you feel, you were in that position where, oh, well, I didn't know and I should have known, because you already have that rule set. Early in my first marriage, I had this situation happen where he was military. We were moving to Germany, and I still owed about $5,000 on my vehicle. And to ship it overseas, you had to have it paid off, and not have a note on your car. So I was scrambling, trying to figure out how to pay, this 5 grand. Being in my mid 20s, I had just quit my job to move overseas, and next thing I know, my new husband had spent $5,000 on a toy for himself.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was heartbroken at that moment, because I was in this position where I didn't know how I would have a car overseas, and he's buying, video game equipment. And it was one of those situations where he didn't think anything of it, because he was used to, having all this extra money, and that's just what he did. It was him. And I was trying to figure out how to have a vehicle so we could, eventually be together. Um, and it was one of those things that really shaped the beginning of our marriage, and not for the better. So I totally understand this. I've been through it, and it's heartbreaking. When you feel that you should have a partner to work through things with, and essentially you feel like they're working against you. So it's, so if you can have those numbers and have those conversations, like you said, conversations, get them out of the way early so you know where you both stand.
That's so good. That's so good. I was thinking about my years of marriage with my husband and the conversations we have. And if there's a big goal in mind, we like a big trip or a big purchase, we do communicate about it. Because of, I'm not going to go too deep into it, of money traumas from seeing what my parents struggles with money and just being, I'm trying to toe the line here because I don't want to be disrespectful. Because in case they listen. But it's just I have some money traumas from childhood that I carried into my marriage, as I mentioned earlier. And therefore that is why we have separate accounts and a joint account, as I said. And I don't have to say, I'm going to spend this because I'm just going to spend it. Because I just have, we're still dealing with that even after 20 years of marriage. We have the conversations with big purchases, but I don't be in his account, he don't be in my account. We just in a joint account. Honestly, he ain't even in a joint account because I be doing things. He's like, he don't care as long as the bills are paid. He's like, whatever, And obviously, I'm the financial counselor for over 20 years. I'm very, very, very responsible. It takes me 3 years just to buy a new phone. Like I'm still have an iPhone 8. Everybody in the house has 13s, 15s, 20s. I take 20 years to buy anything. So he doesn't have anything to worry about. Because of my money traumas, I'm very, very cautious in spending. But I say all that to say, it's just you definitely being able to have those values. It's so important to be aligned with your values, starting with God, number one, and then whatever else is important. Because what if me taking care of the family is important and it's not important? I see that with clients. They're like, well, you're taking care of your mom. I didn't want her to take care of her mama. She chose to do that, And I'm like, really? That's her mom. Like, so these are the conversations and struggles people are having because they're not aligned on their values. And that can lead to infidelity because they're like, well, if he ain't going to do that, I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to buy these shoes and I'll put them in my trunk and hide them until he comes when he leaves. And then I'll put them in the house. And then he's like, where do you get those shoes from? I hear these stories all the time. And I'm like, I never had to deal with that because I'm just going to buy what I want. I mean, within reason and be responsible with it. My husband's not going to be like, where you get that from? You know what I mean? So I don't know. It's hard, but I understand why there's infidelity. Because again, from the money traumas, but also from just not being aligned with the values. But what if you are the breadwinner or you're the one making more money in the family? Does that mean that you get to make the majority of the financial decisions? I only for a period in our relationships made more money than my husband. He's always been the main breadwinner. But I've, been the majority person to make the financial decisions. So even though he makes more money, I mean, that's probably because of the responsibility and my experience. But even looking at some scriptures from that, Ephesians 5:23 says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and of which he is the savior. And 1 Corinthians 7:7 says, I wish that all of you were as I am, but each of you has your own gift from God. One has this gift, another has that. So who should have the majority of the financial decisions in a marriage? Is that based off your salary?
No, I don't believe that now. I honestly haven't believed that my whole marriage. Now, the majority of our marriage, because I was better with finances, I was the one that handled them. And while I wouldn't say that I necessarily made the final decision, I pushed very, very hard for my decision to be the one that was made. Um, and it wasn't until a couple years ago, honestly, that um, my mindset flipped because I focused more on faith and focused more on, following what Christ wants and how Christ models, his with him and his church and how that's supposed to be with marriage. So right now, what we do, we work on it together. We talk about it together. And if for whatever reason we cannot agree, then Chris, as the head of our household, has the final say. I do not know of anything in the past couple of years where Chris has had to do that. It's either we pause and say, you know what, let's just kind of come back to this and see if our mindset changes. We either already agree or we both are like disagreeing on it. But Chris knows and he's comfortable with the fact that he has the final say. I'm comfortable with the fact that he has the final say. It kind of takes some pressure off of me as well. Um, and honestly, sometimes my personality, especially because I do handle so much with him also being in the military, it's like you're not even here most of the time to make certain decisions. But because I handle so much, sometimes I don't want to make a decision at all. Like, I just want you to take the decision and you do it and run with it. And so it really helps to just say, okay, when it comes to everything, you have the final say because you are the head of our household. And I am comfortable giving him that final say because I also know that Chris is plugged into Christ. So Chris isn't, it doesn't stop with him. He actually takes it to Christ and to God in order to make any decision that he wants to make. And because of that, I can trust his decision because, even for whatever reason, if I don't trust Chris, which I do, I can trust God and I can trust Christ. And I know that he's going to lead Chris however way he needs to lead Chris. So, yeah, for us, it's, Chris has the final say. It's not based on who makes more money at what. Chris and I are very clear about what goals we have together and what we want to accomplish. And I know that that's not the case for everybody. We just so happen to be very focused on the same things in life that we know, okay, these are the goals that we have. And this is what, retirement will look for us. How do we make that happen? And because of that, we are able to kind of, live a little bit more of a restrictive life now because we know, okay, later we're able to do more than we probably could have if we were just balling out of control now. But then we also know, because I'm very big on mental health and self-care, so it's like, if there's something that's going to improve our mental health or improve our self-care or even improve our physical health, then I'm not going to say no, we can't have that because 20 years in the future I want us to live a certain life. We have to have a good quality of life now, so we keep that in mind. But because we know all of that about each other, and it's our family values. It's not even my value anymore or Chris's value. It's our family values. That's how we're able to make decisions. And therefore, that's how I'm able to completely trust that if for whatever reason I don't agree with Chris and Chris makes a different decision, I completely trust him. What's going to happen is going to happen. And if I get the opportunity to say, I told you so, then I just get that opportunity. But um, but no, yeah, I trust him 100%. So I'm allowing him to have the final say, and that's following my faith and aligning with the Word of God.
I love what you said about, knowing that he is plugged into God,
Mm.
because I think that would give you that peace that you need to fully trust. But yeah, I think a lot of us, we didn't have that or don't have that because we've not had those conversations. I've been in the position where I was a military spouse. So there are lots of periods where you don't have a career or you're underemployed. So, you're at home and your spouse is the breadwinner. And then I've been in positions where, I was the breadwinner and I had a stay at home husband for a while. So, those are very different aspects. But I think because I had been a stay at home spouse, I understood the value of having someone that stays at home and knows that they bring a lot of value to our family, even though they're not bringing in money. They're washing the clothes and they're taking care of the bills and they're cleaning the house and they're doing all these things that, would cost me, outside of the marriage to have someone provide. So I think knowing both sides of that kind of made me more aware of, okay, even though that person is not bringing in the money or I'm not bringing in the money, they bring value to the household. So it's a 50-50 split. To me, I don't care if someone makes, 5 times what the other person makes, they're still bringing value. And it has to be a 50-50 partnership in my mind. Because it's not going to work, or there's going to be some kind of a resentment if you're not included in that, because one person always makes more, one person always makes less, and one person gives more to the household. So, even working with clients, I've seen this so many times where one person feels so undervalued because they're not bringing in that money, but they're giving so much of themselves in that time that the other person doesn't see. And that brings in that resentment too. So I feel like being the breadwinner, yes, good for you. It's awesome to be the breadwinner for a household. It also brings in a lot of responsibilities because a lot falls on your shoulders. But I think it's one of those things where it has to be 50-50 no matter what each person's bringing in.
That's good. That's good because I never thought of. Well, I mean, we always try to achieve 50-50, but sometimes it's 60-40, and sometimes it's,
Right.
feels like it's 80-20, and you're right. When it gets to be like 80-20 or 90-10, you're like, that resentment sits in like deep, and you're like looking at them like, what are you doing? Like, I need you to step up, get it going. I
Mhm.
don't care you make more money than me. You need to be doing some more stuff. So I'm not trying to put my husband's business out on Jump Street, but I just see a lot of people feel that way about their spouses. Like, I especially, and I have to say this as a woman, as women, especially if we're working outside of the home and we're taking care of the
Mhm.
home and we're taking care of the children or whatever it might be, you start to be like, okay, I'm doing everything. So
Mhm.
I need you to step it up. I need you to do more at home and all that. And I'm not just talking from my perspective. I know a lot of women that feel that way. And I know there's some men out there, but majority of women, I think, feel that
Mhm.
because we are still the primary caretaker of not only of ourselves, which we forget sometimes, but of our children and our husbands or spouses or partners. We are generally the primary caretaker, no matter the situation. I mean, if you're a millionaire, the woman or the I want to say woman because it might not be a woman, but the primary caretaker is usually the person. It's the primary. I mean, it's key. That's why we call them the primary. They're at the helm. They're taking care of everything first, and I think that's why it's important to be in the word and understanding the word that there needs to be a head of household and to be like there is a head of church with Christ, so you can understand your responsibility and your role. Would you agree, Tanisha?
I do. Completely. And I think too, when it comes to when we have that week or that month or however long it lasts where it's a 90-10 or 80-20, then again it's those conversations
Mm-hmm.
of, hey, I'm not feeling the balance here, or I'm not
Mm-hmm.
feeling the harmony, because I feel like nothing can ever truly be balanced. But you know it's one thing if, okay, this month I know that you have a lot going on at work, which means I have to step it up at home, and or I have a big project coming up and I need you to kind of step it up for me. Those conversations allow us to kind of just go back and forth and shift, right? And hopefully remove some of that resentment. But I also think a larger conversation that we need to have is the fact that we do focus so much on money, and time and our resources are just as valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And so whereas somebody's not able to put a lot of money into a certain situation, but they're able to give a lot of time, and that's just as valuable. Or
Yeah.
they're able to provide certain resources, and that's just as valuable. And I think when we look at it from those aspects, we see that that's where we kind of get more of that balance that we're seeking and we're looking for. We just do have to make sure that we are comfortable with our portion and what we actually are providing, and then make sure that our spouse is comfortable, because like you said, a lot of times women will forget to take care of themselves. They will take care of everybody else. And I was a victim of that, where I didn't it wasn't about me, like, oh, I can take care of myself, like as long as I'm up and breathing I can handle everything else. But it
Mhm.
didn't work that way, like my body couldn't handle it. And so it's taking a moment to check in with yourself, check in with your spouse. Are we still on board? And I think that that's also when you have those conversations and check in with, are you are what we doing day to day or week to week or month to month aligned with our goals? And if they are, then okay, we're good unless we have to make some changes. But if they're not, then we need to take some stuff off of our plate, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times we will forget our goals and our plans and what we want to do. And because we don't have that in mind, our day to day is just doing busy work or things that don't really um, matter. Like, if your intent is to stay home and raise the children, but you're taking promotion after promotion after promotion because you're seeking such a high dollar amount, well, is your goal no longer to be a stay at home mom? And if that's the case, that's a conversation that you need to have, or vice versa, if it's the dad that's staying at home. Um, so it's just, you know, it's all a part of bigger conversations that need to be had before you get married, after you get married, and then continuously through marriage. Like, I mean, we're 10 years in, and I love being able to sit down with Chris and have conversations and just say, like, are you good? Like, are you still okay with the marriage? Like, is there anything I need to do? Anything that you want to do differently? And just kind of checking in and making sure that we're okay, because that has a trickle down effect on everything else: communication, finances, where you live, what job you have, and all of that. So we need to make sure that we're continuously having those conversations and being open and honest and trustworthy.
Amen.
Yeah, I love that you have those conversations because, I feel like so many of us don't even
So
know we
many,
need to
yeah,
have
really.
those until until we're in that place where we just want to pull our hair out.
Yeah.
I know like in my past too, how do you talk to a breadwinner about your value when what you're providing, there's no dollar amount to that
Mm.
number or what you're giving, and you're feeling overwhelmed because you're giving so much. How do we have those conversations and those talks and get that person who's bringing in the money to understand that we're doing all this too, but we're not bringing in money, but we're bringing in stability in the home, and we're bringing something for our children to come home to so they're not latchkey kids, that type of situation. How do we have that conversation with the person bringing in the money so that they can understand that there's value in being a homemaker too?
That's a really great question. Go ahead, Tanisha.
I was gonna say disappear for a while, or no, and I know it's difficult to do when you have children or pets or something that's counting on you. But if you were to just stop doing all of the things that you handle because they're not acknowledging your worth, or letting you know that you provide value to the home, stop doing it. And I guarantee shortly after, it will be like, okay, I don't have any clothes to wear to work. What is going on? Or there was no food when I came home. And when they start questioning those things, or worse, have to start doing it for themselves, then that's
Mm.
when, like, okay, you do provide me with a lot of value. Can you get started again? But no, like, we had to do that. I took an extended sabbatical, I like to call, where I kind of just traveled to different family members' houses, because Chris and I just couldn't get along for a point of time, and we really needed to reset. And I went to go see family members that I don't always get to see, and get to um, I was actually able to sit under some people that have been married for 20, 30 years. And, so while I'm visiting them, they're also pouring wisdom into me about marriage. But then also, Chris was back home having to take care of the house, the bills, our cat, and everything, and still go to work and all of that. And it wasn't fun for him. And I told him, like, okay, well, when you don't value me, or if you don't, feel like what I provide is worth anything, then we're not on the same page, and we're not going to work. And, I always joke with Chris and say that he wants a stay at home wife that works full time, because he wants a homemaker, but then he also wants us to, have be a two paycheck home in order for us to achieve certain
Right,
goals quicker.
right.
And,
Hmm.
we've had to figure out what that balance looks like, and how, you know, me as a wife have to figure out, okay, what is it that you really want? Because
Hmm.
this is what you're telling me, and
Yeah.
I can't understand it. But that's also where, we try, if not every week, every other week, to just kind of sit down, check in with each other. How has your week been? Was there something that I could do to kind of be a better wife or a better husband? Is there something that we could have done around the house to kind of make it more of a sanctuary for us? And when we have those conversations, it actually gives us the time and the opportunity to be truthful with each other. Because I think what makes certain conversations hard is the starting point. Like, how do you go up to somebody? And like you said, as the breadwinner, how do I walk up to you and say, hey, I provide all of this value? Where if we have a sit down moment where we're having dinner, maybe, the TV's on in the background or whatever, and we know that this is our time to bring anything up to the table, then we have those conversations and just say, hey, this week I really felt like you didn't value what I was able to do at home. And, you weren't eating my food, and you didn't care that the laundry was done. Um, and that allows, I mean, and they kind of have to sit there, because it's usually an agreed upon, we both are open, and we'll listen. And they have to sit there and they have to listen, and then you allow them to respond and say your feelings. Because another thing that I've noticed is what I perceive, or what I think that Chris is thinking, usually is not what he's thinking. So yeah, a whole nother topic on marriage, right? So,
Right.
but consistent conversations, being open, and then allowing the other person to be truthful with what they're speaking and saying, hey, this is what not is not working with me. But I
Mhm.
mean, I think we've all seen the statistic where it's like the stay-at-home wife or stay-at-home person, their value, like if they were to get paid for all the stuff that they did,
Yeah, hundreds of
Exactly.
woo.
thousands a
Exactly.
year. I
Yeah.
know. And I agree
Yeah.
with that. Like action speaks louder than words. When I started working, and leaving
Mhm.
home and going on my own TDYs as a military federal employee, my husband would see having a young daughter at home, it was funny because I would make sure her hair was done because, as a black woman, you ain't going to mess up my daughter's hair. So I would always make sure my daughter's hair was done, but everything else was up to him. And so I don't he never would say that, oh man, it was hard, but I could tell because I would come home, the house wasn't clean like it was supposed to be. Alana, I think she started wearing multiple the clothes that I was put, just all kinds of things was crazy. And
Mhm.
they was like when I would come home, I would see like a sigh, like because I would leave like a week or so and come back and like, oh,
Yeah.
okay. And I would come home and
Yeah.
clean. And like, yeah, y'all weren't living like you were when I was here. So, and even recently, I got super busy with the business and everything. And like on Monday, I usually wash clothes too, on this weekend. And my husband's like, I ain't got no underwear. I'm like, actually, you do have underwear. They're just not the ones you like to wear because I ain't got around to washing yet. So those kind of things,
Mhm.
they see. He's like, oh man, I really appreciate you. Now he says it more than he ever did because he sees the value that being at
That's
home
good.
provides, and especially during the
Mhm.
pandemic where you're taking care of the house because you're home and cooking more and all that. I'm like, oh man, I'm setting a standard that's
Mhm.
not good. I don't want you to get used to this. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, it is more than just
Gosh.
money. It's definitely the time and the resources
Mhm.
as well.
Yeah, I remember having a conversation, gosh, maybe 3 or 4 years in my marriage, and my ex husband was in a command position with the military, so he was super busy all the time. Never saw him, but I was working full time, and then I was a full time master's student, and then I was doing all those volunteer positions that, as military spouses, we get roped into doing. And I remember having the conversation with him, and I was like, "Look," I said, I can't do everything at one, anymore because I'm doing all these other things. So something's got to give. So either you need to either help me clean the house and keep things up, or you need to pay for it. So I was able to kind of hit him in the wallet because he wouldn't do it himself. So I would take out every week, I would take out a specific amount for cleaning. So he wouldn't have as much spending money every week, and it worked for a while. But I think we have to get creative sometimes too to figure out what works for us because one thing will not work for everybody.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, in wrapping up, I would love us to still, figure out how, or at least share some wisdom on how do we come together in marriages or partnerships to accomplish financial goals and be financially secure? Does that look like just praying, compromising, commitment, communication, seeking wise counsel, or a combination of all of that? In Philippians 4:19, a very popular verse, it says, "And my God will meet all your needs according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus." So, in our final thoughts tonight or today, Tanisha, what do you think about that?
I say all of the above plus more. So obviously, because of our faith, we always want to lead with prayer and just allowing God to speak to us, and specifically through his word. So it's being comfortable and understanding what his word says about money, and then also seeking wise counsel. So people that have either gone through something that you've gone through before. So my mentors are military spouses, people in faith, people that have been married for a very long time, and they're able to speak life into us, but then also able to coach us if things go wrong, and then communication with each other and making sure that we know what each other wants. We are setting goals for each other. Like, here's my goal as a wife to you, and here's your goal as a husband to me, but then here's our goal as a family. And then check-ins to make sure we're hitting those goals, and also making sure that our goals have not changed,
Mm,
because circumstances could change, and therefore what we need and what we want can change. And having consistent check-ins with each other just to make sure that we're good can really help alleviate the awkward conversations and no longer make the money conversation taboo. And then I also, one step further, would be sharing the information with others, whether that's future generations, whether that's you being the wise counsel to other people, um, or your community or your group of friends, and just letting people know that it doesn't have to be secretive. We don't have to, like, we don't have to get into the details. I don't need to know how much money you make to the dollar, but knowing that, this is how you and your husband handle finances may give me and my husband an opportunity to, do something different, or fix something that we're struggling with. So it's also, providing the wise counsel that you've received, and passing that on to others.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think it's, we have to stop thinking about ourselves first, and look at us as a team and a couple. And I think that's something we need to really pass on to others. And as you were saying, just, talk about it. Let's talk about it. It's okay to have these conversations and stop making money and marriage taboo. And look at those generations. My grandparents were married for 70 years, and they lived on one income, and they lived very well. And my grandfather is 94, and he still, lives on a limited income, but he lives well because he gives too. So looking at those people and taking those examples and using that in our lives. But I think it's really just stop being me and looking at us as a couple, and first and foremost.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's a great way to end. So, thank you, ladies, for this episode. It was amazing talking to you both about managing money in a marriage. What a conversation. I'm sure we're going to have many of these conversations throughout this podcast. And our next episode is self-control and spending. And if you want to tune in, we're on where every major podcast directory out there. But you can also email us if you have any questions or recommendations for other episodes at Yahweh at crusaders4change.org. You can also find us on our website at crusaders4change.org. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the crossroads of religion and money. Also, we would love to hear your feedback on today's episode, so please leave us a review or just tell us what's on your mind. And remember to follow our podcast. If you have any questions or suggestions of topics for us to discuss, please email us at Yahweh at crusaders4change.org. To hear all of Yahweh's Money latest episodes, please visit us at www.crusaders4change.org or wherever podcasts are found. God bless.